Another day and more Alvarez circus going on. Yeah, more Julian Alvarez circus, and I think we have to talk about this today. We spoke about it in the previous video. I had my reservations on the deal and some serious doubts on the deal, on the player. But now, especially now, today, on this Thursday morning, it seems more and more likely that Alvarez will be coming to Arsenal. Why do I say that? There's a couple of things I really want to go over today in today's video, and not school you guys, but more or less, I want you guys to take transfer reports with a pinch of salt, okay? Especially when it comes from specific countries. So let's get into some key talking points around that. Some of the Alvarez stuff, the latest stuff around the Julian Alvarez deal to Barcelona and to Arsenal. But before we get into that, please hit that sub button. Really helps a little channel like this, and really helps me in the long run. Doesn't cost you anything, just a second of your time, and we'd love to add you to the community. But let's get into it. So Julian Alvarez, the funniest thing was on Fabrizio Romano's last video last night, he ended the Alvarez part of the video, the timestamp of Alvarez, by saying, and then he would answer the phone for Mikel Arteta or to Mikel Arteta. And I nearly burst out laughing because it just shows, like, if you think about this transfer, okay, think about this transfer correctly. If Arsenal have not spoken to Julian Alvarez or Julian Alvarez's camp, okay, why are they still pursuing the deal? The deal would have been dead in the water. Proper tier 1 journalists as well. I'm not saying Fabrizio Romano is not a tier 1 journalist, but he's not that good when it comes to Arsenal stuff. Let's be fair. Okay, we normally wait for David Ornstein, you know, or even Sammy Mockbell, to be fair. I actually trust Sammy more than I would Fabrizio when it comes to an Arsenal transfer. I'm not saying in general. When it comes to an Arsenal transfer, for some reason, Arsenal just doesn't leak information to Fabrizio Romano. But anyway, Arsenal have spoken to Julian Alvarez. Arteta and Berta have spoken to Julian Alvarez. They've made it clear to him what his role would be in this project, that the team would be more or less built around him. The attack would be built and suited and tailored for him. And, you know, they've explained the project. And from my understanding, Julian Alvarez doesn't have an issue with that. In fact, it's quite enticing for him. He's actually opened the doors for Arsenal in these last couple of days. But the issue for him is not playing for Arsenal. It's moving to England. That is the issue. Okay? That is the issue. Because of family matters, not so much for Julian Alvarez. We know he has been in England before with Man City, and that is where those issues, you know, came to fruition. And that's why he moved to Spain. It's a little easier there for visa requirements for his family and his extended family. And that's his qualms that he has about moving back to England. However, he has opened up to the idea now, especially with yesterday and the day before, where Atleti's come out and they've said 100% the door is closed for Barcelona. He will not be moving to Barcelona in this window or any future window. Okay, it's not a fan, and I'm quoting, but I'm probably just mixing up the words here. This is what they said, reworded in my words. They are not declining this transfer because of financial reasons. They're doing it out of honor reasons, okay? Because we know Barcelona bullied them with Griezmann, and they've had ill feelings since then. And now they're putting their foot down. They're saying we would rather lose the money, okay, so that we can fix this issue moving forward, where Barcelona cannot bully us and bully our players, and, you know, the smear campaign is what they call it. We cut that out now so that in the future it's smooth sailing. So yeah, I think Julian Alvarez understands that the only way he leaves Atletico Madrid to Barcelona is at the end of his contract, which is a massive contract. He only signed it 2 years ago. I think it's up in like 2029 or something. So he's opened up to the idea of moving to Arsenal. And I think when I was making the previous video, yeah, I was just taking things at face value. I was reading, and this is where I come about the schooling, and I want you guys to take reports with a pinch of salt. There's a Barcelona journalist, I think his name is Gerard Moreno, something like that. And his report is always praising Barcelona in this whole saga. Yeah, that Alvarez is not even looking at Arsenal, hasn't given Arsenal a second look. All he wants is Barcelona, and if he doesn't get Barcelona, he will go on strike and all this nonsense. That's what he's saying. And yeah, take that with a pinch of salt, because these Barca journalists, they are so titled and privileged. They think that Barcelona is some god, yeah, and they believe in their soul, which is funny. They're so delusional that they believe that Alvarez would rather not play the entirety of his contract at Atletico Madrid and try and force through to a move to Barcelona. They clearly don't understand or really have the knowledge on what type of player Alvarez is. Julian Alvarez, okay, in a season has played at the Olympic Games, for his club, for his country, World Cups. The guy loves playing football. So I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to sit out a season like a Carlos Tevez or something like that. Probably not. I don't think that. So the other interesting thing is that Atleti have made it clear to him that you are not going to Barcelona under any circumstances in this window or the next. And the only way you get to leave, the only way that we get out of the situation for club and player, is if you go to Arsenal. And on the back end of that, Atleti are actually interested in both Arsenal centre forwards, in Victor Gyokerez and Gabriel Jesus. We know Jesus is not that keen on a move right now because of the wages he's on. But not only that, at the end of this season, he can sign a free, and then, it's a much more lucrative deal for the player. Is that correct? For the player, it is. He can't be blamed for the terms Arsenal agreed to. They agreed that contract. They agreed the years on that contract. They agreed the wages on that contract. If the club are struggling now, they should have made a plan much earlier. They can't force him out now. Maybe they could come up with a situation where they could, I'm not even sure they would want to do that, because they would want sort of a transfer fee. So I don't think they would just cancel his contract. But that could work for someone like Gabriel Jesus. It's still a really top team in terms of placement in Spain, probably the third best team in Spain. They're always challenging. So that could help the Julian Alvarez fee. We obviously know Martinelli's on his way out. A good 55 to 60 million pounds coming in there, or euros. I can't remember the exact fee. And then Victor Gyokerez. I spoke about this in the previous video. I found it really, really strange that he didn't come on against Coventry. And I think this move was being spoken about in the background back then on Friday already, because I think Atleti are really interested in Victor Gyokerez. And Victor Gyokerez is the type of player where I think if Arteta or Berta, whoever it is that sits down with players and explains what's going on, I think if they explain to him that, look, we do think the best way for you is to go to Atleti in this Alvarez deal, because if Alvarez comes, you will not be getting the minutes you got last season. You've got Havertz ahead of the pecking order, and then we've got Alvarez coming in as well. So the best solution for you would be go to Atleti, and I think that would suit someone like Victor Gyokerez, because I think he is all about football. He just wants to play minutes, just wants to have a good time on the field. So I think he would be more inclined to go to Atletico Madrid than Gabriel Jesus. But like I said, don't be surprised if both go that way, if they include it in the deal itself. Look, it's still a long way. I think this will go right up until the end, and that's why I call it a circus. Until Monday, maybe even Tuesday possibly. And like I said, take these journalists' reports with a pinch of salt, because if you just think about it, logically, the type of dealings and recruitment Arsenal do, if a player did not speak to them at all, they would not be chasing him this long. So I feel and I believe they have spoken to Julian Alvarez. He's given them some sort of encouragement, in the sense where, they've explained the project to him. He's found a little bit of excitement in it. And, there are some reports now coming out to say that he has opened up to the idea of moving to Arsenal, because it seems like it's the only solution for him, because the situation at Atletico Madrid is untenable. However, I cannot rule out the possibility of him staying at Atletico Madrid. I think there's only two situations or two scenarios that happen in this current window. It's he stays at Atletico Madrid, and maybe, they put him part of like a bomb squad or whatever it is, like Chelsea had with Sterling. to really punish him, or he moves to Arsenal. I think those are the only two scenarios for him. There's just no way he moves to Barcelona. And yeah, I'm not sure Julian Alvarez is the type of player that would feel okay being shunned out. So I think he has opened up to the idea, and I think we need to open up more and more to the idea of Julian Alvarez coming to Arsenal. And having said that, having taken some time to think about the transfer, in the previous video, I didn't want him anywhere near Arsenal because of the reports I read, and I just took them off face value. But thinking about it logically, if the player comes, I think he could be a top professional. Obviously, the way he's conducted himself now has not been the best. But please remember, Victor Gyokerez conducted himself in the exact same way last season with Sporting Lisbon. So let's not make like we haven't bought a player who has had these professional issues before. Victor Gyokerez did this to Sporting Lisbon last season. He refused to train, he went on strike, and he got his move to Arsenal. Julian Alvarez is doing this, but instead of for Arsenal, it's for Barcelona. But I think I'm thinking more about it now, and it's more of a, you walk into a pub, do you have Guinness on tap? I don't have Guinness on tap. I think about it for a few seconds and I say, give me an ale, So it could just be that. And I probably enjoy the ale as much as I would the Guinness. I wanted the Guinness, but I enjoyed the ale anyway. So, yeah, I think that could happen with Julian Alvarez. I don't think it's a situation where he's saying, no, I don't want to go to Arsenal by any means. I think he has given Arsenal some sort of encouragement. And when I think about that, I don't mind the player coming to Arsenal, because if he gives us a solid 2 seasons, and in those seasons you win a Champions League and you win 2 Premier Leagues, at the end of those 2 years, if he works for Barcelona and you have to sell him for 120 million, then, you've made your money back, even though you haven't in that sense. You've made it back in success. So that's where I am with this transfer at the moment. Like I said, thought about it a little bit more. I do want the circus to end. It's one of the worst transfer windows we've been in. Not only are they inflated, there are so many conflicting reports, so many journalists nowadays. So yeah, let's hope we get to the conclusion. Like I said, it'll probably be only Monday. I know Atleti have given him a deadline for Friday. I'd be shocked if we got the answer by tomorrow. But yeah, that's all for today. Yeah, at the Gooners Voice, let's see if Julian Alvarez does indeed end up in an Arsenal shirt. But yeah, that's all for now. Peace. Cheers. Goodbye.